Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Haltman. We're live. It's our Do You Ever Wonder Hallmark Abstract Service LinkedIn Live. I welcome everybody. Tonight's going to be a great show. Tonight we're going to touch on a story that is not a happy story, and as the title said, it concerns military veterans and the tragic scourge of death by suicide. So a statistic that a lot of people don't really know is that 20 plus veterans every single day die by suicide. And the last year of COVID, between the loneliness, the isolation, the anxiety, it's just made the situation that much worse. So there are many charities out there. Some touch the symptoms, not a ton touch the root cause. And it's important really to hit the root cause. And tonight's guest it has a foundation that does just that. So the lack of faith, and we'll get to Judy in a second, but one of the largest contributing factors, or a key contributing factor to death by suicide, is a loss of faith. And you can only imagine, for a combat veteran coming home from war who has seen a lot, who has done things that would strike at the soul of any of us, they come home suffering with moral injury. And, you can only imagine how that can lead to a loss of faith. So tonight we have a non-denominational combat veterans 501c3 called the Heroes to Heroes Foundation. The founder is Judy Isaacson Elias. And just to really briefly touch on how I met Judy, I was at a business club, I guess pre-COVID, obviously pre-COVID, about 7 years ago, I think. I was sitting across from a woman who was doing a lot of work on a computer. I struck up the conversation. I asked her what she was doing. She described this foundation. And right then and there, I said that I needed to get involved with it. And ultimately, I did. I'm now on the board of it. And it's a phenomenal organization. It saved over 300 military combat veterans' lives through a program, a mission based in spirituality and a reconnection to faith. It saved families, it saved marriages, but let me bring in the true pro, Judy Isaacson Elias. Judy, thank you for joining us tonight. It's greatly appreciated, and it's an important story to tell.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I want to publicly thank you for all you do for the organization. I know you're personally connected to it. Your heart is in it. And taking care of our veterans has become part of your life's mission. And on behalf of our vets and behalf of the organization, I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you. But as I've always said, and this isn't a mutual admiration society or anything, but Judy is a tireless force. She's thrown her entire life into saving these American heroes. And why don't we touch, so because the spirituality, reconnection to faith is achieved through team journeys to Israel, I think it would be appropriate to invoke the word Genesis and ask how it all started.
Okay, I'm going to make this quick because it goes back to when I was 16 years old and no one needs to hear that whole story. But I had lost my faith. I'd lost my faith in my family, in life, in God, in everything I was raised to believe. And we've all been teenagers. We've all been rebellious. And, I went down a pretty bad path. And I was asked by my parents to go to Israel and on a teen tour. And at first I said, no, I don't want to do anything with my religion, or Israel. I want nothing to do with it. And then I thought, well, there's no drinking age. I could go. And I went. And that journey changed my life. I thought it was a trip. I thought it was a vacation, a teen tour, which it, was, but it changed my life. When I put my hand on the Western Wall, I realized I wasn't alone. And I reconnected with myself, with my roots, with my creator, and ultimately chose life, chose a good path to life. Fast forward 2001, my father is driving to a Jewish war veterans meeting, gets into a car accident that ultimately led to him passing a couple of days later. And at his funeral, friends told me, wow, your dad, for the last 20 years, he spent every week helping veterans. I also found out that my dad suffered severely from PTSD. I never understood why my house was a little dysfunctional, a little. But my dad was mainly checked out. He was Second Day Normandy, Battle of the Bulge, liberator of a concentration camp. And he had to come home, bucket up. He couldn't finish college. He just didn't have the attention span to do it. But he worked. He, kind of went from job to job. I never felt I was lacking. A lot was hidden from me and my sisters. But it created a lot of stress in the house. And when I met his friends after his funeral, and they told me, your dad suffered so much, things started coming together. And in December 2009, I met our veterans, our soldiers at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And they were just sent home. They were dealing with medical issues, but they were in different stages of going home. And they were scared and they didn't want to go home. And I saw that. And as a mom, as an American, it broke my heart. I said, what's going on? I have to do something to help our veterans. My grandfathers were World War II vets. My World War I vets. My father was World War II. My uncle was Korea. I come from a long history of Army, of military service. And my husband is an Air Force vet. I said, I have to do something. And I started volunteering for organizations and started hearing about the suicide rate. And I saw what was going on. And a lot of organizations do beautiful work and do wonderful work. At the same time, all I kept hearing was 22 veterans are dying by suicide each day. What I saw out there was, what was going on? Why aren't we really reaching our veterans? We have a lot of Band-Aids. We have a lot of great ideas. We have a lot of things that are just helpful. But we're not getting at the core. So I started looking into suicide. Why would someone make that choice? And all of the literature I read sent me back to faith and connection to faith, and why faith is so important, faith and community. And that brought me back to my own personal experience when I was 16 years old, and how that changed my life, how that brought me back, and that reconnection to faith connected me enough to my family that I was willing to finish high school, stay with them, and move forward. And I thought, what if our veterans are suffering so much that there's no connection? And as I studied, I started reading about moral injury. And I said, what could this be? And with our vets, now imagine going to war. And I know, Mike, we've talked about this a lot, and you've spoken to many of our veterans who have been dealing with this. And when our soldiers are in the theater, they're in a different reality. They're not in America. Even if they were in America in a theater, it's different. If you're on a battlefield, the norms are different. Now, we teach our children from an early age, thou shalt not kill. The average American knows the 10 Commandments. They don't know much about their faith, but they know they're not supposed to kill. But they don't know enough about their faith to know that they're put in situations where they may have to make a decision to save their own life so they can continue. They can continue their faith. They can continue their connection with their Creator. We're preparing our soldiers physically and maybe mentally for war, but we're not preparing them emotionally and spiritually.
Right. So they come home and they're suffering, but no one here can really understand what they're going through. I've always said, if I sat at a diner with a vet going through what they're going through internally, they're not going to open up to me. But with one of their own, someone else who's experienced those experiences, they will. And that's how you conceived of the team idea of sending teams of 12 to Israel.
Right. And I think that begs the question, why Israel? Why this way? What we're finding with our vets and this moral injury, my father wouldn't even speak to his brothers in arms. He was not going there. For his whole life, he never spoke about what happened. Now, when our vets are coming home, often they believe that they're murderers. No one has explained that difference between a soldier and a murderer. The key here is forgiveness. Suicide is rampant in this country, okay, through many populations.
And when not to interrupt, but when you say forgiveness, you're talking about forgiving yourself.
Forgiving yourself, and also feeling as if you can be forgiven by your Creator. Now, many of our veterans are people of faith, men and women. They were raised in their faith. They were raised to believe that being good, following those 10 commandments, is the key to life, being a good person.
Right.
And now they go to war, and war is about killing. You know, it's not political. It's for our soldiers. They're not having a political conversation with the guy who's pointing the gun at them. There's no conversation. It's all about, are you going to kill me or am I going to kill you? It's that simple. So how do we take it? How do we take that situation and how do we help someone feel as if they're okay after that they can have a connection to their Creator? So what we do is we take them on journeys to the Holy Land, to Israel. And people ask, why can't you do it here? Because it has
to be my next question.
It has to be real. Okay. It has to be done in an unashamed manner. When I was 16 years old, if you would have told me to go to synagogue, I would have said, you're out of your mind.
Let me just show this one picture. So,
and we can tell the story. This is Billy.
Right.
And for 5 years, he wouldn't leave his home. He was embarrassed by who he was. He feared what he did. He couldn't find that peace. He couldn't find that forgiveness. And he felt as if God wanted him dead. About 80% of our participants will tell us that they believe God wishes, quote unquote, God wishes I was dead. Now, imagine feeling that way and trying to get up in the morning and move forward when you had been a person of faith. You know, we're shunning faith around the country right now. So people want to laugh at it. They want to run away. And it's very scary to have that connection and responsibility. Well, our veterans feel that connection. And a soldier in the battlefield, that's what he's got. He's got that faith.
Well, the old saying is there are no atheists in foxholes.
There are no atheists in foxholes.
Right.
And we want to create that situation where everything can be cured by something, by talking. Okay, we had a young man named Stephen. Stephen had 4 suicide attempts. His father called me, I'm going to lose my child. He drove him from Arkansas to Newark to meet the team. About the 4th, 5th day of the journey, we went through the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. And Stephen walked out after that, and he told his story to the team. He said, for the first time, I can tell you this because you know what I learned in there? He said, I learned that I'm a soldier. I'm not a murderer. I saw what happened. I saw what the German murderers did. They weren't soldiers. He said, I'm a soldier. And then he told his story and he said he had to decide to save his buddy's life. There was an insurgent who was pointing a gun at his battle buddy. And he had a split second to make a decision. And he had to make a decision to save his buddy. Well, he eliminated the insurgent and then found out the insurgent was 10 years old. In America, that's a child.
Right. You talk about something antithetical to what we uphold is what is a acceptable or even I mean, that would kill anybody. That would destroy anyone inside. And that's what they come home with.
And now, how do you deal with that? You know, traditional talk therapy, which, you know, we have hundreds, probably 100,000, I don't know how many therapists in the country. Well, what they do is validate what you're feeling. They validate your story. The challenge is, how do you change that story? And if traditional therapy leaves out God, and our veterans are coming home and saying, God wishes I were dead, the first relationship they have to reconnect with is their creator, is with God. If that's what's going on, that's healing the soul. And once we heal the soul, we can start healing the body, and the body will start healing, and relationships will start healing.
So when the teams go, and it's teams of men and women, not together, but separate, they go to a variety of different religious and spiritual sites. And for each vet, the reaction, the catharsis that they feel, you know, how it affects them is different for each one, I would assume. Can you just go through some of the places that they go?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we start by taking them up to the Galilee. About 99% of the veterans we take are of the Christian faith. We don't ask before they go. We have taken Jewish people, Muslims, Buddhists, everyone. You know, we never ask before. We ask when we get there, so we make sure they go to the places that they need to go to, that are important to their faith. But we start up in the Galilee, and they walk wherever Jesus walked. They follow his footsteps. They get baptized in the River Jordan. We throw some fun in because it's a very intense trip. And
it's not a vacation.
It is not a vacation. Now, they're working from 7 in the morning until about 11 o'clock at night. There's an evening program. We have a handbook they follow. It's an entire workbook for a year. They have written assignments. They do things like write a letter to God. What would you say to him? And that's their first night assignment. That's a tough one. What do you want to say? And so they're exploring their faith in a way they've never explored it before. But being able to touch and feel these sites. We had one vet who said he wouldn't put his shoes on. He said, to me, this is holy ground. Often we hear, if God didn't want me alive, he wouldn't have brought me here. And then we know we've turned a corner. And now that's where the healing begins. So they start up in the Galilee. They head to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, the whole area of Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Stations of the Cross, the Western Wall, Bethlehem, all of that, it's very, very intense. And we take it slowly, and we give them a little bit of space. They need a little bit of breaks in between. The kind of pinnacle is going up on top of Mount Masada and hearing the story about the suicide. And there's a lot of mixed reaction about that story. But our vets get up there, and that is the day before their last full day in the country. And they gather together, and they commit to each other that they're going to choose life, and they're going to help one another on top of that mountain. And they're not going to make the choice that the people on top of that mountain made many years ago.
So now your organization has saved over 300 veterans, which sounds like a pretty big number. And it is a great number, and it's significant beyond belief. But is that just the tip of the iceberg?
We have hundreds of applications. It's a big challenge because we are looking specifically for moral injury. An important part of what we're discovering is that the outcomes are extremely positive. And there is a professor, Dr. Joseph Currier, who is a go-to person for moral injury in the country. He has the moral injury clinic down in Birmingham, Alabama. And he was introduced to our organization and has embarked upon a long-term research project on our outcomes. And so he's studying initially 100 veterans for a year and a half, from the time they begin the program to the time they leave it. Since we also have a spouses program, he will be studying that program and studying its effect on the outcomes and adding our workbook. There are, he's got just a wealth of information that we're looking to, and he's looking to possibly help with the general suicide issue, which seems to be elusive, no matter what the population.
Right.
There's what's about 24 teenagers die by suicide each day.
It's tragic.
It's tragic, and we're not winning the battle.
Well, I know that for the people left behind. So I've had the honor of meeting many of the veterans, and I've also had the honor of meeting many of the spouses. And in the beginning, I mentioned that Heroes to Heroes has saved not only veterans, but relationships with significant others, relationships with children. I mean, I think overall, the impact is huge, because when you think about someone who comes home suffering the way that they're suffering, they're touching an enormous amount of lives, and turning their life around in turn turns other situations around. I mean, I think that would be correct.
Absolutely. And I think we, as if we all take a moment to think about our greatest pain in our lives. And, we haven't been to war, the greatest pain we have is when we feel when we feel we need forgiveness from someone. That is all of our greatest pain. And if you think about everything, physical pain is nothing when you believe you've wronged someone.
Right.
So all of our therapy and all of what we do kind of ignores that and doesn't hone in on that. And it's an issue that everyone deals with. How do you deal with forgiveness? How do you ask for forgiveness? How do you find it? How do you accept it? Do you feel you're deserving of forgiveness? And it's a societal ill that we brush off and we say, it's okay, don't worry about it. It wasn't as bad as you think. Well, maybe it was. Because we know, all of us know, and I know when I've wronged someone and I don't sleep.
Right.
Okay. Now it's amplified on the battlefield. And our children, it's amplified because we're not giving them the tools.
Right.
So,
well, let me
with the families, to go back to that. How do you ask your wife for forgiveness from something she doesn't even know you've done? How does a veteran, how does a soldier get to the point where he's comfortable saying something to his spouse for fear of rejection? She'll hate me too. So I better destroy my marriage so she doesn't find out, so she doesn't have a real reason to hate me. If I'm just nasty to her, she won't know how really bad I am. And that's what we're working with. We had
No. It's a huge problem with no clear-cut solutions. But I wanted to ask you, Heroes to Heroes is a faith-based 501c3, although it's non-denominational.
Non-denominational.
The government doesn't necessarily support faith-based endeavors.
Right. There's talk about it. They're looking into it because nothing is working with suicide.
However, just to give you an incredible shout out, the VA Chaplains Corps, pre-COVID, of course, did sign on to send a chaplain on each of the journeys, which given the fact that it's a government organization, is a huge feather.
Right. We were starting in New York. Yeah.
Phenomenal. A phenomenal achievement, and hopefully that will help to turn the government into looking at more faith-based things, because that in many ways is what can solve some issues, and moral injury is certainly one of them.
Right. And more faith-based umbrella organizations are popping up, and we're involved in one. And there's our first conference is in a couple weeks in Washington. So it will be interesting to see how that's all working. That's, there's legislation out there, there are grants out there that are starting to be faith-based friendly. This suicide issue has to be solved.
Right.
It's, task force after task force is not going to solve anything.
No.
It's got to be solved. Mental health professionals have to start looking at what we've been doing, because it's not working.
No question. But we don't have a lot of time left. I want to try and get into the nitty gritty. So when veterans are chosen and they're going to go on a journey, there's no cost to them. They have to get to New York.
They have to have a passport. They fly to New York. We take care of everything from New York in Israel, except for lunches. They have a very big breakfast, a very big dinner. And a couple lunches are thrown in. So we do want them to have some responsibility for, just a payment. We do ask for a deposit that's fully refundable once they finish the program.
So for all intents and purposes, though, the cost to the veteran is de minimis.
It's a couple $100 at the most, and that's up to them.
Right. Yeah. So what does it cost? The journey is 12 veterans?
The journey is 12 American veterans, and three IDF veterans, Israel Defense Force veterans, join them. And we've had a Muslim, we've had, Jewish, we've had all kinds of, Israel Defense Force veterans also. So they're not exclusively Jewish veterans. They join us, and that helps ground our vets, that helps them feel safe. Having someone local on the bus and in the hotel with them at night. Of course, we have a tour guide and a bus driver, but that helps ground them. Many of them think when they're going to Israel, they're going to Iraq or Afghanistan. They're not aware that Israel is a very modern country, but it does have its issues. Of course, we all know that. So with that program, it costs us about, and there's a year program when they return, and we have a spouses program. It costs about $10,000 a veteran for, each veteran who joins us. With all the extras, a team going to Israel costs about $165,000 for the entire year.
And the organization sends how many teams a year? Pre-COVID and post-COVID?
COVID, we were up to 6, and we need to catch up. So ideally next year, 2022, we'll be up to either 8 or 10 teams a year. So
I imagine much of the funding, and I don't have to say I imagine since I am part of the board, but there is money coming from foundations.
Right. JNF, Jewish National Fund, has been very, very generous with us. We visit a lot of their sites in Israel, and they have been supportive financially. And, so we have, but it's mainly individual donors. And we have golf outings. We have one coming up in New York, one in Los Angeles, one in Florida. And it's people like the people who are listening today who really give us the most help and support our vets and volunteer to greet them at Newark Airport. And
so there's more ways to get involved than just donating money.
Yes.
So donating money is great. And for anyone watching, across the bottom of the screen, you can actually, right now, you can see the Heroes to Heroes website URL, and donations anywhere from $5 to whatever you feel comfortable donating is phenomenal. But there are other ways to help as well. Volunteering, basically spreading the word of the organization and getting the word out.
Right. And letting the veterans, letting them know, making them aware, mentioning the words moral injury. Many veterans aren't even aware of it. It's not discussed so openly because there's one way to deal with that, and that's through the chaplains. The chaplains in the military and at the VA, that they are totally responsible for moral injury, and there's not enough of them. Right. There's not enough discussion, and that's why it's so important, Mike, that we're here discussing it today. I really appreciate your time.
Well, you know what? I don't know how far and wide this video or this LinkedIn Live is going to go. Anyone who's watching it, it's going to be on Facebook, it's going to be on YouTube, it's going to be on LinkedIn. Any sharing of it that you can do to anyone who you think might have an interest in the organization, in the issue of combat veteran and veteran suicide. We rely on you to help us get the word out, to help us reach as many people as possible who will understand the issue and really look deep down inside. I mean, I personally didn't go to war, and I didn't go to war because I didn't have to go to war, because other people went to war to afford me the opportunity to live a free life in the greatest country in the world. So it's incumbent on the rest of us, and this isn't meant as a sermon, certainly, but it's incumbent on the rest of us to really take care of the American heroes who selflessly go put themselves in harm's way so that the rest of us at home can live free. And that's what I think. But Judy, an unbelievable honor to know you, to work with you. You are, really a beacon of hope for a lot of people who are hopeless in this one area of combat veteran suicide. So, I can't thank you enough for doing what you do. Again, anyone who has any questions, any interest in learning more, you can contact me and I will put you in touch with Judy. And the email on the bottom of the screen, that'll get to me and I will connect you with Judy. So we really hope that some people look deep down and choose to help.
Thank you all.
Any last words, Judy?
Just thank you all, and let's do what we can to keep our veterans alive. And sometimes it's just giving them a phone number or contact and just being there to say hi and give them a smile. Thank you all.
Amen. Take care.